Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Managing Director of International Summits at Singularity University, Bohdanna Kesala. Good morning, Bohdanna. Welcome to Prague. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, thank you.
That's a huge hunger for new ideas, I would say, from 5 to 20.
Yes, we're exponential. We actually practice what we preach.
That's absolutely stunning. Please, let's start with the art of disruption.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to start my talk by telling you all a typical Silicon Valley story. In 2004, I graduated with my Master's in Fine Arts as a painter in San Francisco and started my career as a painter. And here I'm showing you some of my most recent work. I thought that this was going to be my life. I had dedicated, since a child, this was who I was. And I was actually quite successful at it. Now, being a successful painter means that successful, I'm using this very loosely, means you can pay your bills. That's pretty much being a successful painter. You teach, you paint, you sell a little bit of work, but I was happy. But in 2011, I had a personal disruption in my life where I needed to make more money than just pay my bills to take care of myself and my 3 children. And so I went out into my community of friends and said, if you hear of anything out there in the world that you think would suit me, please let me know, and I'll apply for that job. And a friend of mine sent me this post that was on a blog that she was on, and literally all it said was, nonprofit based in San Francisco, looking for an event planner, please apply, and there was a random Gmail address. And so I was like, okay, sent my resume, sent it to the email. About 2 hours later, I get a phone call from a woman named Julia, and she says to me, hi, I just got your resume. Can I ask you a few questions before I tell you about the job? And I said, okay, sure. And she's like, well, first of all, have you ever heard of PayPal? And I was like, no, sorry, never heard of it. Now, you have to understand, this was my technology at the time. It was 2011. This is what I used in my classes. I still use this. I love the slides. I love the sound it makes. And sometimes it's a lot better than all the AV that we deal with here. But she says to me, well, have you heard of Facebook? And I said, well, I opened an account, but I really just don't get it. Why would you take pictures of what you eat and send it to people? And she's like, okay, well, have you ever heard of Peter Thiel? And I said, no, sorry. Now, mind you, I've been living in San Francisco for about 15 years at this point, and I've yet to hear who Peter Thiel is. Now, she says to me, okay, well, let me tell you a little bit about him. And for those of you who don't know who he is probably one of the first unicorns of Silicon Valley. He, with Elon Musk, started PayPal, and then Peter Thiel was also the first investor in Facebook. And that's really where he made his money. And his investment was $100,000, and he's made billions since. That was a good investment. And so she told me about him, and I was like, okay, that sounds really awesome. And she says, they're starting a new nonprofit called the Thiel Foundation, and we're hiring people to work in this foundation. And I was like, all right. She's like, can you come in tomorrow for an interview? And I'm like, why is this woman talking to me? Okay, like, why would these people want to interview me? But okay, I need a job. I'll go for the interview. I show up for the interview, and it's me and this other woman sitting out waiting to be interviewed. And I literally have a peasant top on, some jeans, a nice bag, some earrings on, and I was just myself. And this woman sitting next to me literally had a 3-piece suit on, pantsuit, mind you, with her hair in a very, very tight bun, and she literally had one of those briefcases, like that was square. And I was like, wow, this is what they're looking for. That's not me. But I go in, and I'm being interviewed, and they're just asking me really kind of interesting questions about myself and my life and how I think. And Peter walks in, looks at me, asks me like one question, and then leaves. And that's kind of what he does. And then afterwards, they're like, okay, this was wonderful. we'd like to offer you the job. And I was like, what's the job? And they said, oh, it's to be creative. Literally, that is what my job title was to be creative. Because Peter was collecting people who were outside of Silicon Valley to come in and think differently to put together his nonprofit called the Thiel Foundation. One of the arms of the nonprofit is called the Thiel Fellowship. And that is the project that I mostly worked on. And this was a project where we would find the most interesting young people out in the world who were under 20 years old, who were working on an amazing project, amazing company. And we offered them a $100,000 fellowship, free money, all the connections that Peter has, Peter Thiel that is. And the only caveat to that was that they could not go to college while they were working on their project or on their company or on their research. And this started a huge discussion in the US because currently students right now in the US have $1.3 trillion in debt just from going to university. And so the idea was to start this conversation of, is university actually a one-size-fits-all? Is that a path to success? And here I am with, I've gone through a master's program, and it's questioning my own path as well. But as a woman with 3 kids, and to think, maybe that's not the path for them, or maybe they should go afterwards, or maybe they should do something else with their lives and have that be an actual opening for them, I think was quite interesting. While I was working there, Peter was writing his book called 0 to 1, and I highly recommend this book. And it was interesting for us who worked there because we got to read the chapters as they were written and give feedback. It was just a great time to be working there. And one of the best quotes out of the book, and for me, was the following: doing what we already know how to do takes the world from 1 to n, adding more of something familiar. But every time we create something new, we go from 0 to 1. The act of creation is singular, as is the moment of creation. And the result is something fresh and strange. There's a few words here that really pop out for me. The one is creation, because of my artistic nature and seeing how, arts are not the only thing that we can create. And also fresh and strange. And I actually now use that hashtag on my Instagram account because I just love fresh and strange. Because fresh and strange isn't usually seen as something positive. When someone says that is strange, it's not always a positive thing. And so you have to, again, switch your mindset on what you think fresh and strange is. And then there's the idea of creation. And for me, it's been always creating an actual physical object. But creation can take so many different forms. Now that I work at Singularity University, I see these words that we use here in our narrative at Singularity University, and I like to explain them and talk about them in a totally different way from my point of view, and that's what I'm going to share with all of you. So we're going to take a little quiz, and this doesn't work unless you all answer me, okay? And I promise it's not going to be that difficult. So here's the first question. Does anybody know who this painter is? Just shout it out. Not really, right? Okay. Does anyone know who this painter is? The first painter, his name is Solomon. The second one is Bouguereau. And in the mid-1800s, these two men were the most famous artists in Western Europe. Absolutely the most famous people. They were invited to all the parties. Actually, Solomon won what was then considered like the Nobel Peace Prize of painting, okay? They made all the money. They were absolutely the most successful painters. Who's this? Louder. Exactly, Van Gogh. And who's this? Monet. These two painters painted at the exact same time as Salomon and Bouguereau. These two guys were not considered the best painters of the time. These two men were thought of as jokes. These paintings were thought of as jokes. Why would anyone want to look at this? My child could do this. What? Why? This is one of my favorite paintings of Van Gogh, and I see it as a self-portrait because I think shoes are very representative of who we are. And this quote of his, instead of trying to reproduce exactly what I see before me, I make more arbitrary use of color to express myself more forcefully. To me, this is an artist saying 0 to 1, from taking something to everything. Now, I don't want to diminish what these two men have done. Solomon was 26 years old when he painted this. I think if I was 26 and I painted this, I would be very happy with myself. But to explain my point about the difference between innovation and disruption, meaning 0 to 1 or 1 to n, let's look at Solomon. So Solomon, we can look at art history and see who he was looking at. He was looking at Van Dyck and saying, you know what? I think I can do that better. Who was Van Dyck looking at? He was looking at Rubens and saying, you know what? I think I can do that better. And who was Rubens looking at? He was looking at Michelangelo and saying, you know what? I think I could do that painting better. And it goes back and back and back. And this is Ghirlandaio, who was Michelangelo's teacher. And I could not find his painting online of Samson and Delilah. I do know that he painted one, but not sure why it's not online. But I did add this painting because he was one of the first artists to really start studying perspective, which is a foreground, middle ground, and background. And even that, you can see how the evolution of that one painting, that one subject matter, got better and better and better, and even in the perspective sense, it got better. But again, these were small, incremental steps of making something that existed better. We can also look at the wave from Bouguereau. This was one of the first paintings where there was a woman nude for no other reason than to be nude. Usually a woman, if she's showing any part of her body, there's a reason for it. She's nursing, someone ripped her shirt off, she's a goddess. She wasn't just, someone you knew down the block, naked on a beach. And she's staring back at you. And so this was not, this still made a little ruckus, okay, because it was something a little new. However, Goya did this almost 100 years before. So you could see, once again, what these men were looking at to try to move things a little bit forward. And that's what we do as humans. We see something and we iterate on it and try to make it better. But think about back then in the mid-1800s, and this is what you see every day, and then bam, you see this. Fresh and strange. This is absolutely something crazy. This was insane. I know that we're used to seeing this on placemats and posters and on coffee cups, but back then, this was crazy. Absolutely crazy. And think about those reactions that you've had when you've seen something that you're like, wait, what? Wait, a stranger is going to come and pick me up. I'm going to fill out an app, and they're going to come. I don't know this person, and I'm just going to get in their car, and they're going to drive me where I need to go. That sounds insane. Remember, you guys all had that. You guys all thought that at one point. And now it's just part of our culture that a stranger will pick you up and take you where you need to go. And you don't have to pull out a credit card. You don't have to pull out cash. You just get in and you get out. So that is, I want you to think about disruption versus innovation in this way, that 0 to 1 is disruption. It's taking something that just does not exist and moving it and making it exist. Whereas innovation are these incremental steps. I'm going to go back one. Thank you. So I'm going to switch gears slightly and talk about SU and our mission and welcome you all to the community. And here is our standard mission. This is our mission statement. Our mission is to educate, inspire, and empower leaders to apply exponential technologies to address humanity's grand challenges. Now, something that you're going to keep hearing throughout the next 2 days is the word exponential and exponential technologies. And so let's just quickly talk about what that actually means. It's linear versus exponential. So if you take 30 linear steps, you're going to go 30 meters. If you take 30 exponential steps, you're going to actually go around the world 26 times. Another way of looking at it is just through human history. The exponential curve, you'll hear that a lot. Some people call it the hockey stick. And that is where exponential thinking and ways in which exponentials happen, it's very, very, very slow. And then all of a sudden, there's this huge uptake. And the iteration of the next and the next and the next disruption become, the space between them becomes smaller, smaller, and smaller. Some quick examples of technology. The first GPS receiver in 1981 was 53 pounds and almost $120,000. Now, it fits on your finger and is less than $5. That's exponential technology. Exponential growth, again, 1976, first digital camera was about $10,000. Now we all carry one in our back pockets. They're faster, they're cheaper, they're lighter, and they're 1 million times better. And that's hardly any time. What I want to focus on, though, and I'm going to rewind a little bit. You all know this, right? You've been to SU before, you've heard the talks, and we talk about exponential and exponential and exponential, but we can keep defining these things up here, and my colleagues can keep talking about them, but that's not going to change anybody's life unless you shift the way you think. And again, thinking in your mind, the fresh and strange, and actually embracing it. So how do you shift your mindset? How do you start thinking exponentially so that you in your own lives and governments and companies can actually make the changes that you need to make to be relevant for the next 10 years? I'm not even talking about 50 years, 10 years. And so I'm going to give you a great example that happened through Singularity University. A company called Cerrejón is a mining company in Colombia. And in November of 2018, about 6 months ago, we had our first summit in Colombia, in Bogota, and Cerrejón was one of the major sponsors. And Cerrejón runs a coal mine up in an area called La Guajira, which is where this arrow is. And it's the most northern part of South America, and it lies right on the border of Venezuela. And in that area is a coal mine that actually is the cleanest coal on the planet. And Cerrejón actually ships this coal directly here to Europe. So you are probably using this coal right now here in Czech Republic. It has the least amount of soot, and they ship it directly to all the countries here in Europe. And the issue that is happening there now is where this mine is in an area where a group of people called the YU live. And these are native indigenous people who live in this area. They, with the government of Colombia, agrees that they own this property. And they are of a nomad nature. They don't stay in one place. And La Guajira is a full-on desert. It is one of the most difficult places to get to. And the people there have lived there for hundreds of years. And they go back and forth they don't see a marker between Colombia and Venezuela. They just kind of live in this one area. And so decades ago, when Serachon wanted to mine this area, they had to ask the Wayu people if they could. And for decades now, they have been mining this area and giving the royalties, huge amounts of royalties, to the Wayu. 2 years ago, Serachon decided that they are going to close the mine in 7 years. But what's happened over the few decades is that the Wayu people are now 100% dependent on the royalties that come in from this mine. And so you have thousands of people who are dependent on this one source of income for their food, for everything, for their schooling, for everything that they have. They have no more industry, they don't farm anymore, they don't even have their own goats like they used to, okay? They are completely dependent on this money. And so Serachon decided 2 years ago that they were going to start a nonprofit and try to solve the problem of making sure that when they closed the mine, the actual Wayu people would be self-sustaining. They've spent, in the last 2 years, millions of dollars, millions, trying to figure out this problem. They spent money on water reclamation, how to get better, cleaner water, how to get food to the area, how to teach and bring in technology in the area. Nothing worked, absolutely nothing. And 2 years have gone by and millions of dollars have been spent, and now they only have 5 years to leave this mine and make sure these people can sustain themselves. Because they were one of our sponsors of the summit, they invited a group of us to go to La Guajira to kind of actually see the problem, actually meet the Wayu, see how they live, and see what the area is like. Now, like I said, it's one of the most difficult places to get to. We had to take a plane, and this is like one of those planes that just drops out of the sky for no reason. Like, that's what I thought. I'm like, this is one of those planes that just like, I'm going to get on, and let's hope it lands. And we land, and we have to land at a private airport that Serachon owns, okay? So just a regular person cannot get to this area by plane. We then get in these SUVs, and we drive for 3 hours through the desert. There was not one marker anywhere. There was no tracks, no nothing. We were just driving through the desert. And let me tell you, after 2 hours of driving through the desert, you're like, you know what? I could just disappear and no one would ever find me. It was really mind-boggling. We stop, and we're like, okay, we're here. No. Boats. We were on a boat for 2 hours, this kind of a boat right here. They were like, here are your life jackets. Get on the boat. Like, okay. 9 hours it took for us to get there. This was our hotel, the hammocks, and this is the beautiful area in which we stayed. And this is what we ate every day. It was just the fish that was caught and plantain and rice. So, this was definitely, for me, this was roughing it. I really do enjoy indoor plumbing, but, I did what I needed to do and where I needed to go. The first thing we did was visit one of the Wayu schools that had been built by the government. And as you can see, it's not such a great thing. These children show up every day. They walk miles and miles and miles from wherever they are to go to this school, and they show up, and there's usually just one teacher. Maybe a teacher will show up to teach them. Otherwise, they just sit in these classrooms, play, run around, and then go back to their homes. We also went to go visit where they get their water, and there's only 3 watering holes in the whole area. And we also visited the actual Wayu people, and it's a matriarchal society, so their homes are, it all comes back to the oldest woman. And there's generations and generations living in kind of these communes and these compounds. And what happened a few years ago, the government built beautiful houses, single-family houses. Well, they're all empty. The Wayu wouldn't move in because it didn't fit the way they lived their lives. Again, money wasted. And so after all of this time, we all got together and we were all talking and trying to figure out, like, how would we solve this problem? And I'm going to show you a video. David Roberts, who spoke here last year and who's one of our faculty at Singularity University, he was there with us. Now, mind you, remember, we were in the middle of nowhere. The wind is blowing. This is a recording of him kind of summarizing what we, as a group from SU, were telling Cerrejón to do.
Here's my thoughts then after seeing Guajira, and especially after seeing us try to solve problems like this all around the world. And my belief is that we try to solve them with little pieces, and maybe we fix the clean water problem, or maybe we fix the food problem, or maybe we fix part of the poverty problem. And my belief is that those solutions aren't sustainable. And so what's sustainable is actually fixing all the problems at once for a very small group of people. So you find 50 people in Guajira, and you fix all the problems. And so they get clean water and food and a way to create income, maybe through the internet, and a way to maybe get access to some health care. You fix all the problems for 50 people. And then you tell those 50 people, your mission is to do this somewhere else for another 50 people next year. And then next year you have 2 of these. And then you tell both of them, your mission is to each do this in just one other place next year, and so you'll have 4. And the number seems very small in the beginning, but if you remember exponential math, you double this, and then it's 8, 16, 32. Very quickly, it's 64, and next year it's 128, and next year it's 256. And that is how you change a nation. So my belief is that small visions don't inspire anyone. Big visions start really small.
This is exponential thinking. Small visions don't inspire anyone. Big visions start really small. Once, this was Cerrejón's aha moment. They were like, oh, okay, that's what we're going to do. Now, they've only implemented this process for about 4 months now. We're getting a lot of positive results, but this is just a different way of conquering the problem. And from that point, they realized that they could spend less money and do more good, which is the whole point. And hopefully, crossing our fingers, in 5 years, which is a decent amount of time to be able to change this entire group of people's lives, we're hoping that it's going to work. This is what Singularity University is all about, going from the linear to the exponential. And I just want to keep highlighting that because, again, it's not just about you carrying the knowledge of what exponential technologies are, but it's actually implementing it and thinking differently. Thinking fresh and strange can be positive. We have an amazing community, almost 200, maybe once we count everyone in this room, we will have 200,000 people in our community in 131 countries. All these people are at your fingertips. The app that you have, you can go in, you can sign up for our community and connect with all these people around the world who want to start thinking differently, who want to change their own countries. You can reach out to the people in Colombia. If anyone here has any interest in that, reach out to them. They want your help, they want your voice, they want your input. As the managing director of the International Summits, this is what I do around the world. And that is to empower the partners that we have, like Eva, to put these programs together so that we can hopefully put that seed in your mind to start changing the world, thinking fresh and strange, thinking exponentially. This year, I'm very proud to say we have 20 summits around the world. which I am so incredibly happy about. We're almost in every continent. I'm hoping to get one in Antarctica next year. We'll keep you posted. And we're also doing what we call our industry summits. We're focusing in on specific industries. This year we're doing exponential manufacturing, exponential finance. Next year we're going to do exponential education, exponential governance, and hopefully exponential leadership. So these are very focused in conferences. I'm already in talks with Eva to see if we can also bring one of those industry summits here to Prague. I'm going to end my time with you with a story about my history, and that is about my parents. So you saw my name, and you all know that that's a very Eastern European name. Well, my parents are from Ukraine. They emigrated during World War II to the United States, and I ended up being born in Spain and brought back to the US. That's a whole other story that I'll get into maybe in another talk. But my parents were both born in Ukraine and lived through World War II. Once the war was over, they both went to what at that time was called the Displaced Persons Camp. And so many of you here probably have family members that maybe were in one of these camps. And so now we call them refugee camps, but back then they were called dip camps. And these were people who did not have a country to call their own. Can you turn down the music a little bit? Thank you. And my mom and her family were in one of these camps for about 5 years. And you can see here, this is kind of how they kept track of everyone in the camp. It's very exponential, very technological. And pretty much it was a way station. It was just, you were just waiting to see where you were going to go, right? You were trying to get to the United States. If you couldn't get there, you were trying to get to Canada. If you couldn't get there, you were trying to get to Argentina. These were the places where Ukrainians kind of settled outside of Eastern Europe. Every month, as a child, at one of these camps, my mom would receive one of these tins. And in the tin would be kind of the basics. There would be a bar of soap, there would be a toothbrush, some powdered toothpaste, and there would either be a little toy or a piece of candy. And this was like the highlight every month. And the thing is that you wanted to be placed in one of the dip camps. You wanted it to be, all the Allies ran them, but the Americans had the best camps because they had the most resources. And this is where you got these tins every month, and every child got these tins. So finally, my grandparents and mom were sponsored to come to the United States, to come to New York. And my mom, after about a week getting settled in, not speaking any English, my grandmother walked her over to the school and said, okay, go to school. You know, nowadays we have these picnics, and my kids, you know, we talk about transitions, and we talk about, you know, what the day's going to be like. And really at that point, my grandma just dropped her off and said, okay, go learn English. You know, I'm going to go find a job. And so my mom's sitting at the back of the classroom, not knowing any English, just kind of, you know, go with the flow. And everyone got up, and she assumed that maybe they were going to lunch, or just, you know, she didn't know what was happening. And she went into the auditorium, and she walked in. Now, this is her first day of school. She walked in, and she sees tables and tables and tables of these tins. And the children in the school were making the tins with soap and toothpaste and toothbrushes and candy and toys, and they were making them to send back to the dip camps. And for her, this was obviously full circle. And so she went up and she put a tin together, and she found a piece of paper, and she wrote in Ukrainian about her life and what she was doing that day and how she used to get these tins. And she wrapped it up and put it in the tin. And every month, she would write another letter and usually stick an extra piece of candy in the tins that she was sending forward. And what is that? That's hope. At 5 years old, in middle of New York City, not speaking a word of English, every month she was able to give hope to people who were in her exact situation a year before. And with that, I want to thank you all for your attention and keep hope. That's when things change. Thank you very much.